This is Pete Hegseth. He is currently Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense, one of the highest, most senior and influential positions in the United States government. However, his nomination has been hampered by a lot of claims about him historically, including a claim that he has abused alcohol consistently, both when he was working with Veterans Affairs and also when he has been a commentator on Fox News. Also, that he has engaged in anti-Muslim rhetoric, including when he was at a hotel bar on a work-related trip, leading a chant of "Kill all Muslims." He has a Deus Vult tattoo on his arm. Deus Vult meaning God wills it. It was a Latin term coined by Pope Urban II during the First Crusade as warrant for killing Muslims during the First Crusade and to rally Christians in the First Crusade. And it has also since become a slogan of the far-right Christian nationalists. And then Pete Hegseth has a history of controversial relationships with women. His own mother said in an email to him that he is an abuser of women. He is a serial adulterer. He's currently on his third marriage. And most troublingly, in 2017, there were allegations that he sexually assaulted a woman at a Republican convention. That woman subsequently went to the police and also went to the hospital and did a rape kit. And while Hegseth says their sexual encounter was consensual, he ultimately paid her a monetary settlement for her to maintain her silence. Those are the kinds of things that I think are indicative of guilt on the balance of probabilities or of responsibility. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of questions about Pete Hegseth's appropriateness for this role. Here is how he responds to one of those questions with regard to his use historically of alcohol.
Support the release of that
information. Convince Joni Ernst
you on the issue of alcohol. Oh, we've had great conversations about who I am and what I believe, and frankly, the man I am today, because of my faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and my incredible wife, Jenny, right here. I'm a different man than I was years ago, and that's a redemption story that I think a lot of Americans appreciate, and I know from fellow vets that I've spent time with, they resonate with that as well. You fight, you go do tough things in tough places on behalf of your country, and sometimes that changes you a little bit. And by the grace of God and my Lord and Savior, I had an opportunity to
Jesus calls his followers to be innocent as doves, but wise as serpents. In other words, don't be duped. Don't be naive. Don't allow people to manipulate you or abuse you or take advantage of you. So, with that in mind, when people invoke uh, conversion to Jesus, a grace narrative, and that they now follow their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, what you want to do is look for evidence both that supports the legitimacy of their conversion narrative, but also evidence that goes against it or reasons to be skeptical of it. Some of the evidence that you would look for in terms of a genuine conversion narrative to Jesus is that people, when they receive grace, they look back on their past life and are shocked at many of the things they did. And the result of that is that they take ownership of them. They actually shine a spotlight on them and they seek patterns of reconciliation and restoration and the ownership of their past actions. For example, if that person has a history of anti-Muslim rhetoric, if they've led a chants of kill all Muslims in a hotel bar, their response to a genuine conversion to their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ would be to renounce that rhetoric very clearly and to seek reconciliation and restoration with the Muslim community against which they had offended. If they have a history of womanizing, of hurting women, of exploiting women, of abusing women, even up potentially to the level of the sexual assault of a woman, their response would be again to seek ownership of what they've done, not to pay people off and maintain their silence, but rather to admit what they've done and then accept whatever remedies would be considered appropriate for that in a path of restoration. Same thing when it comes to the abuse of alcohol. But conversely, if a person invokes a narrative of grace and repeatedly appeals to their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, not as a way not as a springboard into critically looking at and introspecting their own past actions and taking ownership for them and seeking restoration with those with whom they had offended. Rather, if they use it as a way to deflect from that critical introspection and the inspection of others at their past actions, if they invoke it as a way to avoid responsibility, if they invoke it as a way to sidestep a rigorous critical screening procedure in order to achieve a very prestigious position in government, for example, that is evidence against the fact that they have had a legitimate conversion. This doesn't mean that we have to make any final decision on whether a person's conversion is legitimate or not. But very minimally, it does mean you don't allow that person to use repeated appeals to Jesus Christ as a way to avoid responsibility, because you recognize that that is in fact exploitive, manipulative, and a way of avoiding responsibility. And if we are truly, as Jesus says, to be wise as serpents, we will not allow people to dupe us into allowing them to get away with past actions without seeking proper responsibility for those actions simply because they've invoked a grace narrative.